My name is Adam Harris, and I never imagined that one day I would stand in front of my own house, staring at the iron lock, feeling like this place was no longer my home. It felt cold and empty. It was a regular afternoon when I came home after a long day at work. My wife, Lila, wasn't home. She usually wasn't the type to stay out late, but today was different. I tried not to overthink it, but something inside me urged me to check her phone. I couldn't explain the unease. I just knew something was wrong. Things had started to change ever since Lila's company got a new boss, James. He was always present at meetings, proactive and confident. I noticed the way he looked at Lila, and more than that, I saw how she responded. She laughed more when he was around, talked more, and suddenly I felt like a stranger in my own family. Our relationship wasn't the same anymore. Arguments had become a routine part of our lives. I felt like I was desperately trying to hold onto something that no longer existed. And that day, when I found the messages on her phone, I knew the truth. These weren't work-related texts or casual conversations. They were something else, something I never wanted to read, but had to face. He's here. I miss him so much. I can't wait until tonight, James. It felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over me. My whole body trembled, not from the cold, but from the rage that grew with every passing second. I looked around the room, the place that had once been our home. Suddenly, everything felt unfamiliar, as if it no longer belonged to me. And Lila, she was no longer the woman I loved. I didn't want to argue or break down. I just needed an answer from her. I threw the phone onto the table and waited. When Lila finally walked in, I asked the only question that mattered. "You've been cheating, haven't you?" For a moment, she was silent. Her eyes shifted, but then she answered, not with an apology, not with regret, but with a statement I couldn't believe.
Yes.
I love James. He makes me feel alive again. It felt like an explosion in my head. Everything I had believed about love and family shattered in that moment. I had sacrificed so much, worked tirelessly to provide for her and our children, only to be betrayed. I couldn't contain the storm of emotions inside me. The anger, the pain, it was too much. Without another word, I rushed outside to my car, driving aimlessly. Everything around me felt like a blur. I didn't have a plan, but one thought consumed my mind. I needed revenge. I couldn't go back to the life I had before. Not because I was weak, but because I refused to let her see me break. When I returned home, my mind was set. I had to take back everything I had lost. The house was silent. The dim light from the ceiling lamp cast shadows across the room. But inside me, nothing was calm. The messages on her phone replayed in my mind, like a wound that refused to heal. I stood by the window, gripping the edge of the table, staring at the dark sky. But I didn't see darkness. I saw emptiness. Lila still hadn't come home. No calls. No messages. No more affectionate glances. Everything we had was destroyed. I didn't know how to deal with the whirlwind of emotions inside me: betrayal, anger, sorrow. She had everything, yet she chose deception. I couldn't accept it. I picked up her phone again, searching for more proof. The messages between her and James repeated over and over. "Where are you? I miss you. Don't worry, I'll be there soon." Each text was like a slap in the face, reminding me that I no longer mattered in her life. My chest felt heavy. How could I have been so blind? Why did I keep holding on to a love that had died long ago? My eyes stung, but I refused to cry. I wasn't weak. The anger inside me burned like wildfire, consuming every rational thought. Lila still wasn't home. The house felt lifeless, nothing but a shell of what it used to be. Every object I looked at, the family photos, the wedding pictures, the keepsakes, reminded me of what I had lost. I couldn't just sit there.
I had to do something.
I walked into my office, turned on our shared laptop, and without hesitation, logged into our joint accounts. It was easy. Too easy. I wondered why I hadn't done it sooner. Every penny, every cent, I transferred it all into my personal account.
I didn't need to justify it.
After everything I had given, I deserved this. Money wouldn't heal the pain, but at least I could regain some control. When the final balance appeared on the screen, I smirked. This debt she would never repay. But this wasn't enough. I needed to do more. I picked up a pen and started writing letters. One for my mother, one for Lila's family. I began to follow Lila, not because I wanted to get back with her, but because I wanted to see her pay for what she had done. I had once loved her, but now hatred filled my heart. Then, one evening while I waited for Lila to come home from a company event, I noticed something. There was something in the way she got out of James' car, her eyes red, not from exhaustion but from disappointment. In that moment, I understood that revenge wasn't just for me, but for her as well. She would have to realize that no one could easily walk away from what had been built. But I said nothing. I just watched in silence. I knew one day she would have to pay, and I wouldn't let this end easily. I had lost too much to just sit there and cry. It felt like I was becoming someone else, someone who no longer had any trace of weakness, someone who was no longer Adam Harris. Everything had changed, and now I could only look forward, not backward. Though there was still some emptiness in my heart, I couldn't ignore the burning anger whenever I remembered what Lila had done. I wasn't one to forgive easily, and if there was something I couldn't forgive, it was betrayal. Though I knew I would never get back what I had lost, I could still find a way to make her realize the pain she had caused me. I started to see everything slowly changing. The days working on the construction site were no longer just a way to make money, but a way to release all my anger. Each hammer strike into the nail, each scratch on my hands, made me feel like I was filling the emptiness inside. The more I worked, the more I felt like I was leaving everything behind and living this new life. I no longer kept any contact with Lila. Her calls, her messages, I turned off the phone and erased everything. I even hired a lawyer to help me with the necessary legal proceedings to get custody of the kids. I didn't want my children growing up in an unstable environment, and I would do everything to protect them from the destruction Lila had caused. However, one thing I couldn't stop thinking about was whether I could ever love someone else again. Would I have the strength to open my heart again? On the nights when work was done, I still felt lonely. Then, by chance, I met Sarah. Sarah was unlike anyone else. She was an independent, strong, and confident woman. Nothing like Lila, the person I once thought was my entire world. Sarah worked at a cafe in the neighborhood, and every time I stopped by, she greeted me warmly. There wasn't an immediate attraction, but there was something in the way Sarah spoke, the way she treated everyone, that made me feel like I had found something new, something peaceful in my life. One afternoon, as I sat drinking coffee and talking with Sarah, I realized I no longer thought about Lila. I didn't feel pain or anger when I thought about her. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief, like I had begun to shed the layers of the past. Still, I knew that I wasn't ready to start a new relationship. I couldn't immediately forget the past, and I didn't want to pull anyone into my life when I wasn't truly ready. Sarah seemed to understand that. She never pushed me, never pressured me, but just quietly stayed there, giving me space to think and being the companion I needed when I was ready. But life wasn't always that easy. Every time Sarah and I started having deeper conversations, a feeling of anxiety would rise within me. I feared that I would face more pain again, and perhaps that's why I always kept my distance, hesitant to move forward. One evening after work, I got a call that I hadn't expected. It was Lila. I didn't want to hear her voice anymore, but in my weakest moment, I picked up the phone. Adam, I'm sorry. Lila's voice was gentle, with a hint of tremor. I know I've hurt you so much, but I really didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to respond. The anger didn't flare up as it once did, but the pain hadn't completely gone away. I had heard enough. Lila, no more. You made your choice, and I made mine. There's nothing left to say. The kids are the most important thing to me, and I will do everything to protect them. You don't understand. I love James, but you've always been the first in my heart, Adam. I was wrong, Lila pleaded, her voice filled with sorrow. I hung up. No tears, no feelings, simply, I had nothing left to say. In this life, I had to keep living for myself, for what was left of me. The next day, I met with Sarah again, and in that meeting I realized one thing: I had started to change. Not because of Lila or anything from the past, but because of myself. I had learned how not to let old memories affect my future. My story with Sarah wasn't a replacement. It was a new beginning, an opportunity for me to reassess myself. And if there was someone who could truly be by my side now, I was ready to accept it. I didn't know what the future would hold, but at least I knew one thing. I had regained my freedom, and nothing could take that away. Life kept moving forward, and I realized that gradually, I wasn't living in the past anymore. I was no longer a man consumed by hatred, no longer the broken husband who had been betrayed. As the days passed, I began to rebuild old relationships, mending the bonds I had once distanced myself from, including those with my family. My children, Hannah and Luke, were growing stronger, slowly understanding that although their parents could not be together, they could still be part of a loving family. Sitting beside them on peaceful evenings, watching them laugh and play, I felt as though I had regained a piece of my life that had once been lost. Layla, though no longer in my life, had faced the consequences of her choices. But I no longer wanted to hate her. Revenge had lost its meaning. My children were my priority, my guiding light. Sarah and I, though not rushing into anything, had built a strong and trusting relationship. She was the one person I could confide in completely after everything that had happened. More than a friend, she had become my partner in life. She understood me, listened to me, and together, we were creating a new future. Not as a replacement for Layla, but as an opportunity to rebuild from the fragments of the past. One evening, as I held Sarah's hand and led her to the small garden behind the house, where we often spent time tending to the plants and enjoying the fresh air, I realized that despite all the hardships, life had given me a chance to start anew. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked, her eyes bright with a gentle smile. I looked at her, feeling the weight of the past years lift from my shoulders. "I feel like I've truly come alive again, Sarah. I lost a part of my life, but now I see things more clearly than ever. I know I made the right choice in taking this path." We stood there in the calm of the garden, where no traces of past pains remained. There was no longer a battle between my past and present, only two people building a future together, looking forward to the good things ahead without dwelling on what was left behind. A month later, I picked up my children from my mother's house, where they had been staying during my initial struggle with the pain of separation. They moved in with me to our new home. They didn't ask much about their mother, but I understood that what they needed most was my presence. Their happiness, the sense of security they felt with me, was all that mattered. I no longer needed to reclaim everything from my past. Sometimes the best thing to do is to leave it behind and move forward. And in that realization, I understood something vital. Though I could not go back and change the past, I could still create a new life for myself, for my children, and for the person I loved. That night, as I stood with Sarah and my kids beneath the starry sky, I knew I had learned the most important lesson of all. Forgiveness isn't just for others. It's for myself, too. And with that, I no longer had to live in the shadow of my past. For me, a new life had just begun.